Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2019 drama movie titled First Cow. Now, First Cow runs for 2 hours and 1 minute long. It is directed by Kelly Reichardt. The script was written by Kelly Reichardt and Jonathan Rene, based on the novel The Half-Life by Jonathan Rene. It is produced by Neil Kopp, Vincent Savino, and Anish Saviani. It is composed by William Tyler, the cinematography by Christopher Blovelt, and it was edited by Kelly Reichardt. And the stars of the movie are John Magaro, Orion Lee, Toby Jones, Ewan Bremner, Lily Gladstone, Gary Farmer, Scott Shepard, Alia Shawkat, Dylan Smith, Stephen Malkmus, Mitchell Saddleback, Jared Kasowski, Todd A. Robinson, and Rene Auberjonois. So, yeah. Sure, the early impression you'll get with the movie Fast Cow is first. When I say Fast Cow, no, I'm just joking. First Cow. That's the name of the movie, not a Fast Cow. If there's a Fast Cow, he'd be called Speedy Meatloaf. No. First Cow is what the name of the title is. Is the bizarre title. First Cow. What do you mean by First Cow? I'm sure there's a lot of cows around. What makes this one a first cow? But however, I guess it's more eye-catching than the novel this movie is based on, called A Half-Life by Jonathan Raymond, or is it Jonathan Ramon, if you want to francophone his name. Which probably might give me some credit points, being that I am from a predominantly French-speaking province. The centerpiece of this movie refers to the first cow to arrive in the frontier region of Oregon back in the 1820s. You see, Oregon has not yet become a state, because, the whole Lewis and Clark expeditions only started by 1845. Anything post-1845, anything in the West has not yet been established. Remember, the first 13 colonies were all located in the East. It was only until Lewis and Clark's exhibition out west is when other states started to develop. And Oregon, I don't think actually ever became officially a state until probably around the 1860s or 70s. But also the termination of the word first cow actually is a metaphor, and it derives from the term change and position and transition. Change and transition. Now, what do I mean by change and transition? Well, with the decline of the rugged and burly trappers who hunt beavers for their personal gain, we're introduced to a still very rugged society, but the transition that we're seeing here is that instead of these big, burly fur trappers, yes, most of the early British and non-native settlers who were coming in within the reaches of these states, but most of them were like hunters and gatherers. And most of their ways of survival is through hunting. Whether it be beaver, whether it be deer, whether it be other kinds of small mammals. And they were doing it not only just for their personal gain, but also for their survival. They used it to eat. They used it to make their clothing. And back then, there was really no place for the weak and the vulnerable. If you don't supply any goods, they got no fucking problem than to shoot you. Shooting you off, no big a deal. There's no room for the weak. You want to be weak? Fuck you. You're going to be dead. They don't give a shit. Think they care? No. If you go through any kind of crooked dealings, they'll kill you. I mean, a lot of their survival instincts is every person for themselves, and only the strong survive. And if you're not able to fulfill that kind of obligation, well, I hate to break the news to you, but you're fucked. But as we go through this change and transition, we still have the rugged, strong, burly trappers. But now we're starting to see a more different transitions as more dimension was coming by way and of being more successful from a business standpoint and through the use of partnership instead of every person for themselves. And that, of course, leads us to our two leading protagonists and their talents for creating mouth-watering biscuits. The aforementioned biscuits will commence later on in the film as the film progresses. But in the prologue, set in the modern era, we see a runner. Now, in the opening scenes, we're set in the modern era, and we see a runner who's running with her dog in the forest, when all of a sudden, they discover a startling discovery. In the middle of the forest, they spot two skeletal remains of two men in the secluded woods in Oregon, which might seem disturbing at first glance, but the skeletons lead us to our story. It leads us to who they are, what they're up to, why are their remains here. And it would lead up to the events that led to their demise. Because to be honest with you, this movie does not have a happy ending. It's kind of morbid. So at the beginning of our full-length flashback, we see a scared, naked Chinese guy named King Lu, played by Orion Lee, who is being chased by Russians. Fortunately, he was saved by a Polish Jewish American who goes by the name of Otis Figowitz, or everybody knows him better as Cookie, played by John Magaro, a scruffy but timid cook who's frequently belittled and verbally abused by his tough, rugged trappers who have no hesitation to kill him if he doesn't put some grub on the table. Remember, if you don't provide the goods, you're gonna be dead. Not only do they have no room for for the weak, they also have no room for the worthless. If you're a worthless piece of shit, well, fuck you, you're dead. The living conditions of these trappers is definitely more destitute. It makes the settings for McCabe and Mrs. Miller look like a luxury hotel. Frontier life in Oregon, in the Pacific Northwest, must have sucked. The food was scarce. The bread that was given to them tasted like shit. And just their living conditions was pathetic. This is definitely no life for any human, let alone these trappers. Sure, they could probably survive eating rabbit or deer meat, but you just can't live off of protein alone. I'm sure there's vegetation around too as well, I guess. But it's basically an every person for themselves situation. And they don't care whose foot they step on. If you wince in pain, they'll just step on it even more. For giggles and tits. Yeah, the environment they lived in was quite toxic. And I don't envy them. Sure, they probably were not adjusted to their old home life where everything was all hunky-dory, peachy keen, and kosher kalat. But now they're in the wilderness, and it's always the survival of the fittest. But because Cookie isn't, a trapper, he's a cook. Knocking him off for showing little to no contribution to the community isn't going to be a problem to them. There'll be no sympathy, there'll be no remorse. They'll just take your body and bury you someplace. No fucking deal. While the earlier scenes are about surviving the frontier lifestyle back in the day, the later scenes begin to get more tender and gentler as the two friends, King Lou and Cookie, come up with a plan to get the respect they rightfully deserve. All I can tell you is that there's some great chemistry between actors John Magaro and Orion Lee, being that they could be quite complex due to their cultural backgrounds. I mean, not besides the fact that one's Chinese and the other's Jewish American. But they never let it be problematic because they formed a bond based on trust and care. They look out for one another. Almost like brother to brother. And that's a great feeling. Even when the going gets tough and they feel that their lives in danger, the one thing they could say is that at least they had a friend to look out for each other. Whether one perishes or both. The friendship between Cookie and King Lou is definitely very strong and affectionate. It doesn't go in the same direction as the 2005 film Brokeback Mountain. I mean, I don't see any of them doing any of them being homosexual. There might be some ambiguity to make us believe they might probably be gay, but there's never any implications about them being gay. I mean, we shouldn't really just judge a book by its cover. Now, not to say that there's any problems if they would have went that direction, but they didn't. As far as I'm concerned, they're probably just very good friends. I mean, you don't have to necessarily sexualize characters to just shoehorn it into the narrative. So it's never been confirmed if Cookie and King Lou are a homosexual couple. Maybe they're just platonic partnerships and nothing more. Who just stand out for each other. Who look out for one another. And show the care and affection any friend could have. And you know what? That's a good thing. And I'm glad they didn't go in the same direction as Brokeback Mountain. Now I know what you're saying. Oh, what's wrong with that, you homophobe? No, there's nothing bad. It's just that we've seen Brokeback Mountain before. We don't need to have constant movies where every character who forms a partnership with somebody of the same sex necessarily have to get romantic. They could stay platonic. Nothing wrong with that either. But it's just that if we keep bringing out all these Brokeback Mountain themed movies, it eventually does start to become tired and laboring. Like, oh god, we have to see this again. Oh fuck. I don't want to see this again. Oh jeez, does every movie have to be Brokeback? No, it doesn't. Maybe these two are asexuals. And you know what? I don't give a fuck. I don't care what their orientation is. Because it doesn't matter. We like to see movies that are original, and the way they portray male friendship is balanced by mutual trust, genuine respect, and being very domestic, which was contrary to the time where male bonding was more toxic and more brutish in demeanor. And yes, okay, and you know what? Even I get sick of that too. Even in today's society, a lot of male bonding usually comes with being toxic, brutish, and just trying to pry upon those who they believe are the weak and vulnerable and make them look like they're inferior to them just so that they could feel all the more powerful. It's nothing new. It's been going on since the beginning of time. Always the strong like to pry upon the weak and vulnerable. If you're weak and vulnerable, you're going to get bullied. Well, that's what life was like in the frontier then. It's no different than what it is today. It's still like that. But at least, in the friendship between Cookie and King Lou, you don't see that. You see a group of pairings that are mutual respect for one another. They don't necessarily are out play fighting or throwing mud at each other. You don't see them, giving high fives and handshakes to the point where they're trying to break each other's wrists. No, nothing like that at all. It's a very calm, gentler, and more sophisticated friendship. And that's the kind of friendship that I always like to see in a movie. I'll be kind to you if you be kind to me type of thing. It doesn't have to be romantic, and it doesn't have to be toxic either. I like that kind of balance. King Lou is more educated by way of business and planning, while Cookie is more reliable towards his baking skills. So with King Lou's financial intellect combined with Cookie's baking skills, these guys are the perfect recipe for success. And maybe the more money they make, the better the chances they could to get out of this hellhole of the frontier life in Oregon. Of course, they have plans to migrate to California, which they believe is more better opportunity for them than to be stuck in the hellhole of the middle of nowhere Oregon. Nothing personal against people from Oregon. I'm not talking about modern day Oregon. I'm talking about frontier life Oregon. So anybody who's from Oregon who's listening in, no offense. Nothing to be offended by. So then a lot of people are asking, oh geez, I'm talking about the friendship between King Lou and Cookie. So then I ask, where does the cow come in? You're talking about friendship and all, but you're leaving out the cow. Alright, I'm going to get to the cow. I'm going to get to the little moo-moo. Because of Cookie's exceptional baking skills, he is also a confectionery genius. And one of his greatest creations, mouth-watering biscuits. And of course, one of the main ingredients to make these mouth-watering, delicious deep-fried biscuits, well, apparently you need milk. But how can you get milk when there's no cows in Oregon? Well, this is where the cow comes into effect. His gift for making the best of biscuits go back to where he was a big city cook in Boston. Unfortunately, in Oregon, there's only one cow on this frontier who is under the guidance of some millionaire or some rich landowner who goes by the name of Chief Factor, played by Toby Jones. She's the only cow who's residing in the frontier. She's the only hope in them having their business a success. The problem is that her owner is a rich man named, of course, like I said before, Chief Factor, played by Toby Jones. So what do? A whole bunch of fur trappers and only one cow. Well, apparently, I guess the old way to go is if you want to make money, you have to earn money. And sometimes what you may do may not necessarily be morally right. Sometimes you might have to do some underhanded, sneaky tactics to make your bread. Get it? Because biscuits, bread, money. Get it? Pun? Funny? No? I thought it was. Oh well. No counting for one taste, to each their own. Yeah. So, what do? When no one's looking, they steal the cow's milk. They go out at night. They milk her, and they use the milk as ingredients to their oily cakes. And everybody just lines up for their oily cakes. They all love it. And Cookie and King Lou are making their money, their profits. But of course, this is their profits is just so that they could make better business outside of the Oregon frontier. Of course, like I said, they want to migrate to California because California is more greener pastures than Oregon. But everybody has been lining up for their oily cakes, and they have become a big success. And even one day, Chief Factor pays them a visit to try out their oily cakes. And even he seems to approve of them. And then he asks them to make some kind of a pastry dish called I can't pronounce the name. I think it's called a courtefoie, which is almost kind of like some sort of like a flattened cake. It's not a pancake, but it's like some kind of a flattened cake to give to his guests. Like I said, I don't remember the name. I know it's some kind of difficult name. Anyhow, they get invited to his estate, and everybody seems to love Cookie's pastry dish.
I know, right?
And then, but then also Chief Factor is like, his cow hasn't been producing much milk lately. So now, I mean, of course, this leads to suspicions.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I often got a bit scared of Cookie and King Lou's kind of heinous measures to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, they are practically stealing.
No.
I mean, sneaking late at night to milk her. And Chief Factor is wondering why she hasn't been producing. Eventually, it's going to lead to suspicions. And once he catches on, they're dead.
Oh no. Hello, drastic.
Chief Factor, if Chief Factor knows, if Chief Factor finds out that Figowitz and King Lou are stealing the cow's milk, he's got to place a bounty on them.
Oh no, that's not nice.
And he's going to kill them. Whoever said this wasn't nice. This is 1820s. This is 1820s Oregon.
1820, eh?
Yes, where if you commit a little act like that, you are dead.
Alright.
They don't fuck around in any way, shape, or form. When words come along about where they got the milk to make their tasty goods, Chief Factor isn't pleased about it and will stop at nothing to bring these guys down. So this is what happened. One night they took the cat out. Cookie and King Lou were milking the cow. The cat was on some kind of a loose board of his house. The board got loose. The cat came down. One of his henchmen saw Cookie and King Lou run off. He awakens Chief Factor. Then Chief Factor starts to realize that, oh my goodness, no wonder why the cow hasn't been producing much milk. It's because these two bastards are sneaking in late at night, stealing her milk, just to make their oily cakes. So, So therefore, he has placed a bounty on these two, and they are not wanted alive. They're wanted dead.
They're alive.
Preferably dead. These guys are outlaws now.
That's not even right.
I know. So although and this is pretty interesting about Chief Factor. I mean, actually, believe it or not, Toby Jones actually turns in the best performance as Chief Factor. And although he comes across as more sophisticated and noble than compared to the big, rugged, burly trappers with their long hair and their scruffy mustaches, he's still quite capable of creating just as much as malice as them. Maybe more. I guess this kind of paints him off as like the villain in the story. Even though Cookie and King Lou are doing some rather despicable acts of actually stealing and trespassing on his property, just so that they could get their own capital gain. The chase in the woods might have a great level of intensity that you might find in a horror film. Because no matter where Cookie and King Lou are, chances are they're not going to be able to run forever. Apparently they are going to catch on. So they can run all they want, but in the end, they're fucking rat bait. And this movie is not conventionally a horror film. They are both running from their lives from Chief Factor's men. And they've been hiding it out for a very long time. But their hiding is soon going to get to them, too. So you feel very bad for them at the same time. And I have an assumption that they might have been caught and killed on the spot, and their bodies were buried in a shallow grave where they would have only been discovered 200 years later. Maybe 300. I mean, at the final scene, you see Figowitz and King Lou hiding from Chief Factor's men in some dark, secluded area. My guess is that no sooner after that scene is over, they were toast. And have been buried in this forest since then. I know this film differs from the traditional westerns like shootouts, macho guys with their guns and cowboy hats, and heroic vigilantes taking down menacing villains. That doesn't mean that the atmosphere is settling. It isn't. It's a pretty dog-eat-dog world out there in frontier Oregon. Where Oregon is still, at its early stages of colonialism. It's not at that level yet, but it is making a lot of progress. There's a great deal of tension through every scene as Cookie and King Lou do walk a tightrope by doing some form of robbery for their own capital gain, while we know sooner or later they will get caught. And it just goes to show you that even though a lot of people may hate capitalism, unfortunately, when it comes to the business runs of economic society, capitalism is still the best. And though we may hate it, it's just something that's virtually untouchable, which is different from communism, socialism, and libertarianism, and anything else in between. Capitalism is just something that really is hard to touch. And although we may hate it, but still, it is one shell that we can't really particularly fully crack. Under the direction, script, and editing, Kelly Reichardt's movie has 2 hours plus runtime, and there are scenes that still could have been trimmed down a bit. For one thing, this movie was 2 hours long. I think this movie would have benefited if it was a 90-minute movie. I mean, there were a lot of scenes where she could have, trimmed it. Because there was a lot of really, really slow pacing in this movie. I mean, sure, it's a good way to introduce the characters and all, and the character development was good, but it took too long. There are scenes here that can at times come across as awkward, and some of the dialogue can be a bit off-putting. The camera work, for the most part, is restrained and never moves at a rapid pace. And though the music doesn't have a vast selection of songs, we are still delighted to organically hear the sounds of nature spectacularly that's more fitting to the settings. But still the pacing of the film that will likely wear the viewer out. And even, I think the only time I've ever got really excited was Chief Factor's scenes. Other than that, even I was like, when is this scene going to end? When are we going to see something interesting? However, those who are into art house movies, it's an essential commodity. One of the two more standout scenes is when Cookie offers a biscuit to Chief Factor along with some honey to add some flavor to it. Factor seems to enjoy every bite he consumes, though it might not seem like much to those who like their movies at a high speed. I mean, this was before Chief Factor finally found out that the milk that was made to make these oily cakes came from his cow, since it was the only cow in the frontiers. And this is before Factor started to turn rogue. But I still found it an effective way of telling the story for a movie of this caliber. It might run on turtle legs, but this movie does throw an important theme of subtlety and tells a better story. It's definitely a story about friendship and what true friends are really like. And it also helps to sort of understand how the sacrifices one must go through to keep and solidify the trust within each other. I really, really enjoyed this movie, though I probably will only see it maybe once in a while, not like an all the time type of thing. It does run very slow, and I think for a 2-hour movie, it could have been trimmed to maybe an hour and 45 at the most. So when all is said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give First Cow from 2019 a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead, but just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.